Hi, you're listening to Everyday Superpower, the place where you can take some time to learn about body language and nonverbal communication. On this channel, what I'm going to teach you is how to detect deceit, how to know when someone is attracted to you or repulsed by you, the signals you put out into the world, and essentially how to read the minds of others by their own subconscious and unconscious gestures and behaviours they put out into the world, whether they're talking to you or whether you're just watching from a distance. If you enjoy the lessons I have, I'm uploading very regular, and I have quite a nice catalogue behind me as it stands, so feel free to click subscribe. And without further ado, we're going to carry on into today's lesson. So today we're going to focus primarily on a very small, isolated area of the face. In particular, it's going to be the eyebrows, okay? We're going to be talking about lowered eyebrows and what they represent, what they indicate, how to identify them with the quickness, and how they happen in real time, perhaps to a particular topic or something you say, or even a thought that may have sprung into their mind at that particular time. So this is lowering the eyebrows, and what they signal is anger, aggression, and potentially fear, dependent on the time they're lowered, which we'll get into in a moment. So we've discussed briefly earlier gravity-defying gestures, okay, and closed body language. So gestures that reach upwards into the sky are deemed primarily positive for the most part, such as somebody scoring a goal at a football match and raising their arms in celebration. A smile reaches towards the sky. We've spoken about the toes of the feet raising to the sky in celebration subconsciously in an earlier video. And on the contrary, what happens when a piece of body language, a behaviour or gesture slouches or touches the floor or points towards the floor? It tends to indicate the opposite, so it's negative. Alright, it's a negative feeling. It may be an anxious and more so of a closed representation of how an individual feels, okay? And closed body language isn't really what you want to be seeing for the most part in your communications with people. You want to have them relaxed and open and receptive to to how you're interacting. And the same goes with yourself. You want to be open, whether it be you consciously keeping your mind on having your body open, or you want to be just in such a generally comfortable state that your subconscious mind is keeping yourself open rather so than closed in and defensive. All right, so I digress. What we're talking about is the eyebrows. So they aren't defying gravity, they're actually getting pulled towards the floor by gravity, which is definitely a negative thing. And it's a closed body language. But why is it closed? Because the raising of the eyebrows opens up the face, opens up the eyes, okay? It's a very open gesture. It absorbs more information from the eyes, alright? So when somebody flashes their eyes at you to say hello, in a way, what that means is that their eyes are opening and absorbing more of you rather so than shutting you out and seeing less of you, which is what we consider an eye-blocking behaviour, alright? So it's closed body language, and it's a gravity pulled gesture, both negatives. It's part of an angry cluster, okay? So when an individual is angry, the expression as a whole closes the face for potential conflict, okay? This is hardwired biologically from our primitive and limbal brain. Alright, so our primitive ancestors would need this emotion pre-verbally to protect the face from potential attack, realistically. So if you consider the eyebrows lowering to conceal the eyes and defend the eyes, alright, we need our eyes to see. It's one of our more sensitive areas, which we definitely don't need under attack. Alright, so the eyebrows lower in case of potential attack, so you can also consider it a threat response. Alright, It can be used to create an impression of authority and dominance, alright? So, a boss in a workplace could generally have lowered eyebrows rather so than a positive, bright, bold uplift of the eyebrows. Now, we can see how this works, as someone who is dominant may strike a degree of fear in the subordinates to retain control. Personally, I don't think it's the best way about it. I think, positive and open communication is more beneficial, but that's my personal opinion. All right. It can be micro gestured, so you can see this very briefly, a very fleeting, sudden, less than a second engagement of the eyebrows if you were to speak to someone and just swiftly go over something they don't enjoy. Okay, so let's say I'm having a conversation with someone and I say, "Hello, how are you doing? How is your mother doing?" And in response to the word mother, the eyebrows slowly yet surely just come down and then bounce back. Okay, just very quickly. Well, perhaps I shouldn't say slowly, because it's a micro gesture. They can do slowly to really accent the behaviour if they're going to stay in position, and they're going to stay on that negative thought for a while. The reason why it's negative is because they've just had an argument with their mother briefly, okay, before your conversation. So they're still in a state of discomfort about their mother. So when you ask them how their mother is doing, in response to that stimuli, their body has reacted in a very accurate manner, all right? Because what they respond with verbally may not be the truth, whereas what their body has responded to in real time represents a real-time honesty, okay? And that's something you do have to believe in. So when we're speaking of micro gestures, it can be less than a second, but if you catch it and you start to see this behaviour reoccurring in your communications with people, you can really start to dial it in and start to understand what this tiny little gesturing behaviour signifies. Whilst we're on the topic of micro gestures, okay, I understand I haven't done a video on these yet because it's a lot easier to get started covering the foundation of more evident isolated behaviours, but microgestures essentially are behaviours and gestures we're speaking of now, but in an incredibly minute and quick, brief manner, okay? And something that is so minute and on the spot and quick is actually a lot more honest than something which could potentially be more controlled. All right, so it is one of the purest forms of identifying non-verbal behaviour and honesty within that communication. All right, but just to use another example, something which I see from time to time, and something which perhaps you will as well, is when you initially converse with someone. So if you're to say, if you're to spring a surprise on someone you know, or if you are to ask for assistance in a shop and you ask them a question, perhaps before you've even asked the question and you said "excuse me," or when you've asked that question and it's been something they've disagreed with, if they have trouble potentially finding what you've asked for, or so on and so forth, you might see this fleeting little micro gesture in response to acknowledging you. Why is that? Because the eyebrows have come down to protect themselves from the potential threat. Maybe you yourself are physically threatening. Perhaps the question you've asked triggers a threat because they don't know the answer. All right, or maybe it's a degree of eye blocking behaviour where they might not necessarily just like what they see in you, and in doing so the eyebrows have come down momentarily to shut out that information. It's the opposite of the eyebrows raising and what we call the flashbulb eyes, the eyebrow raise, which I covered in one of my earliest videos. All right, it's the counter opposite of that. All right. You can somewhat consider a consistent lowering of the eyebrows, also a little bit of a squint, a little bit of an eye block. All right. So Just one last thing to cover. You see this quite boldly in children who don't get their way, okay? When the eyebrows are dropped for too long, it shows weakness and insecurity, alright? So when a child is annoyed and on the verge of crying, you'll see them pull this scrunched up expression. This shouldn't be confused with what we've discussed, which is more of an aggressive, momentary manner, alright? So this isn't a constant state of lowered eyebrows, scrunched up face, which can also come alongside, a more closed off, uncomfortable, nervous, anxious body language, alright? What we're talking about is a more aggressive behaviour, right, which can come with closed body language, just like the other one. So it's up to you to identify the cluster, the environment, the context, and so on and so forth, which is the surrounding environment of the behaviour. But one thing to just sort of throw in, just to add a extra little bit more substance in there, is if the eyebrows come with a lower head, all right, so a lowering of the head, what that can signify is a closure of the neck, all right, so the neck needs to be protected in the face of a threat, because it's an incredibly sensitive and vital area for survival. So both the eyebrows lowering to conceal the eyes and the head lowering, whereas the eyes are still in contact with you, they're not looking down at the floor, they're looking towards you but concealing that neck. It may be quite a significant behaviour to take attention to. If verbally they're not aggressive, their body language actually openly declares that they feel that they need to defend themselves in some manner, so you may need to diffuse that situation through some means. Hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. Alright, if you have any inquiries, I've got my email address in the bio. Other than that, click subscribe and we'll keep things moving. Thank you. Goodbye.